The old man was used to living alone. His house was far from the village, tucked against the edge of the hills where the grass grew tall and the air was quiet. Every morning he would rise with the sun, fetch water from the well, tend to his little garden, and mend tools for anyone who wandered his way. He had no wife, no children, no family left. The villagers respected him, but often whispered about how lonely his days must be. He would smile when they said that. Loneliness had become his companion, and he thought he had made peace with it. One evening, while returning from the forest with firewood, he saw something small curled up beside the path. At first he thought it was a bundle of rags someone had tossed away, but then he heard it. A faint whimper, a shallow breath. The old man set the wood down and leaned closer. It wasn't rags at all. It was a girl, not a human girl. Her skin shimmered faintly in the fading light, a pale lavender hue mottled with dirt. Her limbs were thin as sticks, her clothes torn and barely clinging to her small body. Two fragile antennae protruded from her head, trembling weakly as if they were too heavy for her to hold upright. Her eyes, huge and dark, blinked up at him with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. The old man froze. He had heard rumors of starships falling in the hills long ago, whispers of strange beings scattered by the crash. The village children told stories of sky orphans, but no one he knew had ever seen one. And yet here one was no bigger than a child of 7, half-starved and shivering. He crouched down. "Little one," he said softly, his voice cracking from disuse. You're going to die out here." The girl didn't understand his words. He could tell by her vacant stare, but she understood his tone. She flinched, tried to crawl backward, but had no strength. The old man sighed, lifted her gently in his arms, and carried her home. That night, he set her on a bed of blankets near the fire. She was so light it frightened him, as if bones and skin were all that kept her from vanishing. He warmed water, crushed some root vegetables into a thin soup, and spooned it carefully to her lips. At first she resisted, her eyes wide with mistrust. But hunger won. She swallowed greedily until she coughed, and he had to slow her down. When she finally fell asleep, curled against the fire with her antennae drooping, the old man sat back and rubbed his aching hands. He should take her to the village tomorrow. Someone younger, someone stronger, would know what to do. Yet when he thought of leaving her, he remembered the way she had clutched at his sleeve even in her weakness, as though she feared he would vanish. So he stayed. Days became weeks. The girl recovered slowly. She ate whatever he prepared, bread soaked in broth, roasted tubers, berries from the hills. Her cheeks filled out, her trembling lessened, and soon she could toddle around the house on her spindly legs. Though she didn't speak his language, she made little chirping sounds, curious hums, and sometimes laughter like the ringing of tiny bells. The villagers noticed eventually. When the old man walked to market with the girl, clinging to his cloak, whispers followed. "Why keep it?" some muttered. "It's not even human." Others were kinder. "She looks happier. Maybe it's better this way." The old man ignored both. He had raised lambs and goats, cared for wounded birds, even nursed a fox kit once, but none of them had ever looked at him the way this little alien did, with eyes so wide and trusting it felt like a weight and a blessing all at once. She learned his name, or rather, she made one for him. "Bah!" she chirped, tugging his sleeve whenever she wanted him near. He didn't correct her. The sound filled the empty rooms of his house with something he hadn't known he missed. Family. Still, raising her wasn't easy. She cried at night, haunted by memories he couldn't soothe. Sometimes she would sit by the window, staring at the stars, humming a song in a tongue he couldn't understand. He guessed she dreamed of parents who had never come back for her. One stormy evening, she refused to eat, clutching her little arms around herself and shaking. The old man knelt beside her, unsure what to do. Finally, he wrapped her in his arms and simply held her, rocking slowly as thunder shook the house. To his surprise, she relaxed, her humming softening into sleep. That was when he realized he wasn't just feeding her. He was becoming her shelter, her anchor in a world that had stolen everything else. Months turned into years. The girl grew taller, her steps steadier. She learned words, halting at first, then clearer, She called him father, one morning without thinking, and the old man's eyes filled with tears he hadn't shed in decades. She followed him to the fields, carried baskets of vegetables, and laughed when he showed her how to fish in the river. The villagers grew accustomed to seeing her, though some still kept their distance. A few children dared to play with her, fascinated by her glowing skin and her quick, graceful movements. The old man grew older, too. His back bent further, his steps slowed. Sometimes he worried what would happen to her when he was gone. Would the village accept her then, or would she be left adrift again? But whenever those thoughts came, he looked at her smile and told himself he had given her a home, given her love. That had to be enough. One winter, sickness swept through the village. The old man fell ill, coughing for days until he could barely rise from bed. The girl, no longer so little, stayed by his side. She fed him broth, fetched herbs, and sat awake through nights, humming the same tune she once sang to the stars. He thought then that perhaps she had saved him as much as he had saved her. When spring returned, so did his strength, though weaker than before. He knew his time was shortening. One evening, as they sat by the fire, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Listen, child," he said, his voice rough. "When I am gone, you must keep living. Don't let this world make you small again. You are stronger than you know." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "You not go," she whispered, clinging to his hand. He smiled sadly. "Not today, but someday. Remember, family isn't blood. It's the ones who stay." Years later, when the old man finally closed his eyes for the last time, the villagers gathered at his house. They found the alien girl grown into a young woman, standing tall beside his grave. Some thought she would leave then, vanish into the stars she often gazed at, but she didn't. She stayed in the village, tending his garden, mending tools as he once had. When the children asked why, she only smiled and said, "Because he gave me a home. Now this is mine, too." And so the story spread, not of a strange orphan girl from the sky, but of a daughter who had been starved and forgotten until an old man chose to love her as his own. Love, the villagers realized, could cross even the boundaries of worlds.